Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really core concept.
Yeah,
Thinking.
absolutely central.
And we're looking at it not just, in everyday chat, but how it gets unpacked in linguistics, even in business.
Right. We've got some fascinating sources. They look at meaning through different lenses, linguistic theory, how we learn, even how it works in, say, business English.
So our mission today, I guess, is to pull out the key threads. How is meaning actually constructed? How do we share it?
And how is it understood, or maybe misunderstood sometimes? We want to give you a richer perspective on this thing you use constantly.
Okay, let's get into it. We should probably start with structuralism, foundational stuff.
Definitely. Structuralism.
Yeah.
Basically, it views language as this interconnected system, like a web.
Where everything gets its meaning from its relationship to everything else, right? Not just in isolation.
Exactly. And the big name here is Ferdinand de Saussure. His book, Course in General Linguistics, way back in 1916, really laid the groundwork.
He gave us the linguistic sign, didn't he? The two sides.
The signifier, that's the word or the sound, like tree.
Okay.
And the signifier, that's the actual concept, the idea of a tree in your head.
And the crucial bit, which is still kind of mind-bending,
Yeah.
is that Saussure said the link between them is arbitrary.
Totally arbitrary.
Hmm.
Random. There's nothing tree-like about the sound tree.
We just collectively agreed on it.
We did. And this idea led him to develop semiotics, the whole study of signs and symbols, not just language.
He also pushed for looking at language synchronically.
Right, like a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
Studying the system as it exists now, rather than just its historical evolution.
And he made that distinction, Lang and parole. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So Lang is the abstract system. The rules, the grammar, the vocabulary that a whole community shares. It's like the language potential.
Okay, the shared knowledge.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
parole is, well, it's you and me actually speaking. It's the individual act of using the language system.
Our specific utterances.
Saussure said, language is a dynamic system of interconnected units. He saw this underlying structure.
But he also believed linguistics will have to recognize laws operating universally in language and in a strictly rational manner.
Right. He was looking for those universal rules within the Lang. But the parole, the actual usage, that's where the dynamism and sometimes the confusion comes in, which is key for communication,
Definitely. Okay, so then there's Leonard Bloomfield, also a structuralist, but with a slightly different angle.
Yeah, Bloomfield saw language more as, well, as behavior, something
Yeah.
you could observe and study scientifically, empirically.
Like watching what people do with language.
Exactly. He was very focused on real-world usage.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he used both synchronic, that snapshot view, and diachronic analysis, looking at how language changed over time.
And he had that quote about starting with the sounds. Right?
That's the one. Linguistic study must always start from the phonetic form and not from the meaning. He really emphasized phonetics, the actual sounds of speech.
So structuralism, broadly then, it's about looking at the parts within the whole system, the contrasts, the relationships giving meaning.
Precisely. And that sets us up nicely for functionalism.
Okay, functionalism. How does that differ?
Well, functionalism, which kind of grew in the 1920s and 30s, partly inspired by structuralism, shifts the focus. It asks, what do we do with language?
So it's about the purpose.
Exactly. How does language meet our communication needs? Sharing info, expressing feelings, influencing people, just keeping the conversation flowing. It's all about the function.
So this is where we get the distinction between language form, grammar, sounds, structure, and language function, what we're actually trying to achieve, like asking, commanding, informing.
Spot on. And this perspective gives us some really useful tools, like Roman Jacobson's work.
Ah, yes, the 6 functions of language.
Right, he broke it down. First, the emotive function, expressing the speaker's feelings.
Ouch, or wow.
Got it. Then referential.
Referential is just conveying information about the world. The sky is blue. That's cool stuff. Okay, then conative. That's about the listener, isn't it?
Yes, influencing the listener. Commands, requests, pass the salt, or even advertising trying to persuade you.
Right. And phatic. That's an interesting one.
Phatic is the social glue, keeping communication channels open. Hello? You still there? Nice weather, huh?
Small talk, basically.
Kind of, yeah. Checking the connection is live. Then there's metalinguistic.
I thought you meant language. What does arbitrary mean?
Exactly. And finally, the poetic function, focusing on the message itself, its form, its beauty.
Like in poetry, slogans, jokes, where the way something is said really matters.
Precisely. It's a really neat breakdown of the different jobs language does in any given utterance.
Okay, so that's Jacobson. Now, M.A.K. Halliday. He took functionalism in a slightly different direction again, didn't he? With systemic functional linguistics, SFL.
He did. Halliday really saw language as a social tool, fundamentally shaped by context. His theory, systemic functional grammar, or SFG, looks at grammar as a set of choices we make to create meaning in specific social situations.
And he talked about three main functions, or metafunctions.
That's right. Three broad ways language works. First, the ideational metafunction.
What's this about?
Representing experience, talking about the world, what's happening, who's doing what. It's the content, like the cat sat on the mat, describes the state of affairs.
Okay, representing reality.
Then there's the interpersonal metafunction. This is all about interaction.
How we connect with others through language.
Exactly. Establishing roles, relationships, expressing attitudes, politeness. Can you pass the salt, please? The please and the question form shape the interaction.
Got it. And the third one?
The textual metafunction. This is about organizing the message itself, making it coherent, making it flow.
Like using and, but so structuring sentences so they make sense in sequence.
Precisely. It's about creating text, whether spoken or written, that hangs together and relates to its context.
So if we compare Jacobson and Halliday, Jacobson seems more focused on the specific functions within a single communicative act.
Yeah, like zooming in on the different purposes of an utterance.
Whereas Halliday is looking more broadly at how the whole language system is organized to allow us to make meaning in social contexts.
Exactly. Halliday is providing this bigger framework, seeing language as a resource for social life, shaped by context, while Jacobson helps us analyze the ingredients of communication.
Okay, so functionalism, in summary, is really about understanding language by looking at its uses.
Jacobson helps identify those specific uses, and Halliday gives us this really rich, context-based model, SFL, for how we make meaning happen.
Fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and think about the mind. How do we actually process and understand meaning? This brings in learning theories, right? Cognitivism and constructivism.
Absolutely. Both emphasize that the learner isn't passive. Cognitivism, it tends to view the mind like a computer.
Information processing.
Right. Learning is seen as this internal mental process involving memory, attention, how we solve problems. It's about what's going on inside the head.
And constructivism.
Constructivism puts more emphasis on the learner actively building their own knowledge. It's not just processing information. It's constructing understanding through experience and interaction.
So more focus on doing and interacting with the world.
And critically, with other people. Social context, collaboration, reflection, they're really central to the constructivist view. Learning is personal, but also shaped by culture and society.
And Lev Vygotsky is a huge figure here.
Oh, massively influential in constructivism.
Yeah.
His concept of the zone of proximal development, the ZPD, is key.
Explain that one again.
Okay, so the ZPD is basically the difference between what a learner can achieve on their own, independently, and what they can achieve with guidance and support from someone more knowledgeable, a teacher, a peer, anyone. It's that potential learning space.
The sweet spot for learning, you called it.
Exactly. And the support provided in that zone, Vygotsky called scaffolding.
Like temporary support structures when building something?
Precisely. You provide help, hints, prompts, breaking down tasks, and then you gradually remove that support as the learner becomes more capable.
Makes sense. And Vygotsky really stressed the social side of learning.
He really did. He believed learning happens socially first, then internally, and language for him wasn't just for communication. It was a crucial tool for thinking itself, for organizing thought.
So if we compare cognitivism and constructivism directly.
Well, focus-wise, cognitivism is on internal mental processes, constructivism on actively building knowledge through experience.
Learner's role. Active processor versus active builder?
Right. Key thinkers. Maybe Piaget often linked with cognitivism. Vygotsky definitely central to constructivism.
Social interaction. Less central in classic cognitivism, vital in constructivism.
Teaching methods reflect this. Cognitivism might focus on guiding thinking processes, memory strategies. Constructivism emphasizes facilitating collaboration, hands-on projects.
And the role of language.
In cognitivism, often seen as a medium for expressing thought. In constructivism, it's a fundamental tool for learning, thinking, and social interaction.
Key concepts. Cognitive development stages, perhaps, for cognitivism?
Versus ZPD and scaffolding for constructivism.
So, quick summary. Cognitivism learning happens inside the mind. Constructivism learning happens through doing, interacting within a culture.
Pretty much. And Vygotsky's ideas about social learning, the ZPD, scaffolding, they're just incredibly influential in education today.
Okay, great. Now let's bring this back to meaning in a more everyday sense, just regular English conversation.
Right. So in just general English, meaning is basically, what we intend to convey when we speak or write.
And what we understand when someone else does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems simple, but as we've seen, it's complex.
And it's so much more than just the dictionary definitions of words, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Tone of voice, body language, gestures, facial expressions, they all carry meaning.
And context is king, right? The situation, who we're talking to, our relationship.
Hugely important. That's why misunderstandings happen so easily. We interpret all these signals differently sometimes.
It's funny how we navigate this mostly intuitively in daily life, though.
We do.
Yeah.
We don't usually stop to analyze Jacobson's functions when someone asks us to pass the salt.
Huh, true. Okay, but what about specialized fields? English for specific purposes, ESP, like linguistics itself.
Right. So in a technical field like linguistics, meaning is studied very deliberately. You have semantics, looking at the literal meaning of words and sentences.
And pragmatics, which is all about how we use language and context to achieve things, how we interpret intentions beyond the literal words.
Exactly. It's a much more analytical approach to meaning.
And then there's business English. That's another specific context with its own rules for meaning.
Definitely. Our sources highlighted some key characteristics. The style and tone, for instance.
Generally formal, polite, avoid slang.
Yeah, you need to maintain professionalism. And the vocabulary is often specific, business jargon, acronyms, technical terms relevant to the industry.
The goals are usually pretty clear too, aren't they? Informing, persuading, negotiating.
Making decisions, instructing. Communication tends to be direct and purposeful. Clarity is paramount.
Grammar and structure need to be pretty standard and correct as well.
Absolutely. Proper sentences, correct punctuation, appropriate tenses, it all contributes to clear, unambiguous meaning in professional documents.
Which brings us to writing skills, emails, reports, proposals. They need to be super clear, concise, organized.
Essential skills.
Yeah.
And speaking skills, too, for meetings, presentations, negotiations. You need to be persuasive, but also respectful.
And it's not just the words. Cultural awareness seems really critical in business English.
Hugely. Understanding different cultural norms around politeness, directness, nonverbal cues, etiquette, it's vital for avoiding offense and building relationships globally.
You also need to be adaptable, right? Adjusting your language for the audience, the specific purpose.
For sure. And these days, being comfortable with digital communication tools is just part of the package. Emails, video calls, collaborative platforms.
So, wrapping this all up then, understanding meaning is clearly not just one thing.
Not at all. It's this really complex interplay of, well, everything we've discussed. Linguistic structures,
The functions of communication,
our own cognitive processes, how we learn and build knowledge,
our social interactions, Vygotsky's ideas.
and crucially, the specific context.
Yeah,
Whether it's just chatting with a friend or writing a formal business proposal.
it's incredibly multifaceted.
It really is.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. Maybe take a moment to think about how your own understanding of meaning shifts.
Yeah, how does it change depending on the situation you're in or who you're talking to, or even just how you're feeling that day?
And maybe consider how being more aware of all these different layers, the structure, the function, the mental processing, the social context, the specific field, how could that awareness actually enhance your own communication?
How could it make you a better communicator? And maybe a more insightful interpreter of the messages you receive every day? Something to chew on.